You're with Clement Manyathela
on 702.
Let's Walk the Talk, streaming on the Prime Media Plus app,
DSTV channel 856,
92.7 and 106 FM.
8 minutes after 9 o'clock. Dumelang, welcome to the show, the Thursday edition of the Clement Manyathela show on this third day of April. Thank you for joining us here on 702. I hope you're well this morning. The show kicks off with the 702 open line this hour. You can call on 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. Also, if you want to watch us live on YouTube, all of our 6 cameras here in studio are streaming this show live. So if you want to watch and listen, you can go to the 702 YouTube page right now. Liberation Day. That's what Donald Trump, the US president, described yesterday in America as he was announcing these sweeping tariffs on imports from countries around the world. South Africa is among the worst affected. We have been slapped with a 30% tariff. We're actually among 60 countries that have been singled out for higher tariffs.
We take care of countries all over the world. We pay for their military. We pay for everything they have to pay. And then when you want to cut back a little bit, they get upset that you're not taking care of them any longer. But we have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first. And I'm sorry to say that. And today we're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first. South Africa, 60%, 30%, and they've got some bad things going on in South Africa. You know, we're paying them billions of dollars, and we cut the funding because a lot of bad things are happening in South Africa. The fake news ought to be looking at it. They don't want to report it.
Yep, that's what Donald Trump said about South Africa as he was announcing these sweeping changes. And it's not just us. China has been slapped with 34% of tariffs, Lesotho 50%, Taiwan 32%, the European Union 20%, Japan 24%, India 26%, South Korea 25%. I think the UK got about 10%. And the list goes on and on and on. The US is the second largest export market for us. I think they account for almost a tenth of total exports that are leaving this country. So this is concerning, especially because for the last 2 decades or so, we have enjoyed duty-free access to the US market through AGOA. So these exports expected to face these high tariffs. Trump was announcing even the 25% tariff on all vehicle imports of foreign-made automobiles, as he put it. And this is going to hurt our vehicle exports, which enjoyed the AGOA benefits for a while now. I mean, think about the agricultural exports. Think about the wine industry. They're all going to be affected by these new duties. And I want to hear about, maybe you are in an industry that really focuses a lot on exports. How are you preparing yourself? How are you going to be responding to these tariffs? The tariffs are going to be coming into effect on Saturday. So I'm interested to hear from you how you think South Africa should respond. You can give us a call or send us a WhatsApp voice note. Trump said if countries cut their own tariffs on the US, he is prepared to lower these duties. So is that what we do? Cut our own tariffs? Do we retaliate with higher tariffs on the US imports? What do we do? Because there's no doubt that if many countries retaliate, inflation is going to worsen across the world, and that's going to have an impact on economic growth. And that's going to endanger global economic development. Already, if you look at the global markets, they tanked just after Donald Trump made this announcement. So does anybody know what Trump is trying to do here? How is this not sabotaging his own people, the Americans? Because they will bear the brunt. When the tariffs are heightened like this and hiked, businesses have to find a way to plug the hole. So what do? You raise your prices for that market. Or does anybody know that this is going to benefit America at some point? Maybe you share that school of thought. I'd like to hear from you on 011-883-0702. Send your WhatsApps on 072-702-1702.
Clement Manyathela, streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
DSTV channel 856
92.7
and 106 FM.
Okay, so you calling us from the East Rand. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement.
Hey.
I hope you're well.
I'm good.
Yes, yeah.
Good. How are
Clement, yes. No, I'm fine, thanks. You know, Clement, I think as much as we can bemoan what Trump is doing, right, around the world, I think South Africa now, we're at a seminal moment for us where we also need to look at a lot of the policies that have been enacted by the ANC since 1994 and whether they're good for the country, right? So, for instance, like, I don't know if you were following the thing with the DA where we asked for, devolution of power back to the provinces because power is obviously being nationalized, right? So they asked that power must be devolved back to the provinces, but it's something that they basically almost brushed off. And you ask yourself, like, who was consulted in a referendum when we had this nationalization of power from the onset in 1994? No one. There was never any referendum done to ask people, like, what do you want and what model do you think can best work for South Africa? It was almost like a decision was taken, similar to like what's happening now with this 1% fact, right? Where there's, the public outrage against it, but we literally just had it shoved down our throats as citizens and we're supposed to just take it. So there's never ever been almost like an honest reflection for them as a party to look at what policies have they enacted over the past 50 years which have been successful and which have worked out and which ones have failed. They haven't actually sat down and done that exercise. So I think this offers them that golden opportunity to actually sit down and look and almost introspect as a party and look at what their policies have done to the society. So I think it's not all bad that's coming from this because it will bring about a lot of honest reflection from their part.
But why do we need tariffs? Yeah, I'm struggling to connect that link, Koketso, between those policies that we need to reflect on and these tariffs. How and why? If I'm trying to understand, why do you think this is what we needed?
I think if you look at it, for instance, Donald Trump just simply has a problem with the ANC. That's basically the long and short of this, right? He has a problem with how the ANC is run in South Africa, and obviously he's taken advice from Elon Musk, which is not always 100% true, but he's taken advice from him. So what I'm saying is that the ANC as a governing party is the party that actually needs to sit and do introspection for themselves to say, in the past 30 years, how have we managed South Africa? So unfortunately now, with how the economy is going, it's going to force them to do that because this, tariffs of Trump are going to bring about a lot of job losses, are going to take away money that America has basically been giving them as a party to manage this.
But remember,
so it's going to force them into that difficulty of having to look at their policies as a party. That's what I'm simply saying.
Okay, cool. Koketso in East Rand, thank you so much for calling us. Just remember, guys, that this issue of tariffs have got really nothing to do with us. If really this is between South Africa and the US, then we would be the only ones or one of the few countries that are affected. You go and look at the list. It's a very long list of countries that have been affected. So we need to be careful here not to think that this is just a moment again that raises questions about our relationship with the US. In fact, you look at a number of countries. How many of the countries? I mean, there's China here, there's European Union, Vietnam, Taiwan, India, South Korea, Thailand, Switzerland, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, United Kingdom, South Africa, Brazil, Bangladesh, Singapore, Israel. See? It's got nothing to do with us. So we need to separate the matters, right? There are certain decisions that the US president has taken that Trump administration has taken as a result of our own, policy differences between the two countries, or what Trump believes is happening to the white Afrikaners here. But this is a separate issue. Yeah. Israel is also being slapped with a 17% tariff. And then there's Australia, there's Pakistan, Turkey, Sri Lanka, Colombia, Peru, Norway, Costa Rica. I can go on and on. Jordan, Argentina, what's this? There's Myanmar, there's Tunisia, there's Serbia, there's Egypt, Saudi Arabia, there's Cote d'Ivoire, there's Botswana, there's Morocco. The list goes on and on and on. This is a completely separate matter. You've got a US president now that is trying to redefine the US economic policy. He said yesterday that this is a declaration of economic independence for America, a day that he said will be remembered as the day the American industry was reborn. So it's about bringing trillions into the economy. At least that's what he believes. But is it what is going to happen? His argument is that many U.S. trading partners have enjoyed these low import tariffs in the U.S. while those countries levy high duties on U.S. goods. That's why you've got this universal tariff of 10%, which will be levied on all U.S. imports. And there are a number of countries that are already preparing to retaliate, which is why I'm asking you this morning, do you think retaliation is the best option for us? Are you maybe someone in the industry, wine industry, manufacturing, automobile, whatever industry you're in? If you are exporting to that market in the US, you've got to start thinking about what you're going to do. Have you thought about that? How concerned are you, if you're in the industry, about how this is going to impact your business? I really would like to hear from you. The UK, the EU have threatened to retaliate, but make no mistake, this is a shift, a significant shift from the years and years of US policy. So how is your company preparing for this? How do you respond to stay afloat? Let's go to Teenage, who's calling us from Cosmo City. Teenage, what are your thoughts? Hi.
Hey, Clement Manyathela.
Sure, man. Go ahead.
Sharp. America, as much as Trump is a kind of a mad person, but they're tired of being big brother to everyone. I mean, what's wrong with just changing tariffs because you think they'll work for your own company, for your own country? The same applies to us if we were to do tariff to Malawi or Zimbabwe. It will be for the benefit of the people. So if Trump is saving his America, why do we have to worry? Why can't you just say, okay,
how do you think he's saving his America, Teenage? How do you, from your own assessment, how does something like this actually benefit Americans?
I think Trump believes that intra-trading in America itself is better than going outside. That's why he doesn't want to rely on outside wealth. He wants to rely on Americans and keep money in America. That's what he's doing. I think that's a gamble that he's willing to do. For us, is to say that, okay, fine, USA is the second economic trading partner. Why can't we go take it to number 6 and save Asia and Europe and increase our trade there instead of focusing on America all the time? It's not a big brother anymore. You can see it was.
Okay, Teenage in Cosmo City, thank you very much. I'm really interested to see how this is going to turn out. The world is integrated. You cannot want to isolate yourself if you want to grow economically. You can't. That's why everything is connected. That's why when you look at the markets right now, they tanked after this announcement by the president. And look at how we are going to be affected just by the reaction to that decision, the reaction on the markets. Why? Because this is a globalized economy. So there's no one country that can just isolate itself and be so self-dependent that it wants to isolate its allies, its trade partners. Americans are going to bear the brunt. And Trump understands that, but he doesn't stress that a lot when he announces these plans. He talks about how, and this, you could argue, this is a gamble that he's willing to take. Great. But be honest to Americans and tell them you're about to have it tough over the next couple of years. Or is this a gamble that if it goes well, the benefits are suddenly going to come in the next 6 months, in the next year? I doubt it. Here's some of the WhatsApp on 072 702 1702.
Good morning, Clement. Thanks to AfriForum, Solidarity, and also DA for the tariffs hikes, because lying about what is taking place in the country. Of course, also it might be part of also being part of BRICS. That is the reason why also that it's added. Moshe Rebai.
I think in terms of a response, we would be very naive to think we can retaliate. I mean, in terms of a world economic scale, we are a speck of dust. So, I think it's, go with the flow, roll with the punches. This too shall change. We just need to be smart.
Hi, Clement. I just think this is just time for Africa to actually rise, eh? Donald Trump is just saying we need to rise and unite as an African country and realize our capabilities, I suppose, right? Yeah.
Morning, Clement. I think what the Trump administration did is that they just opened the market for take. So in other words, they just took the foot off the tiger. So that means anyone can have other alternatives, because what they're trying to do is that to prove that the world needs America more than America needs the world. So it's about time we prove them wrong. Pretoria. Good morning.
Hi, Clement. Hope you well. So the other thing I think people are overlooking with this liberation of the U.S. Is with them doing these tariffs, I think ultimately they just want to lower yields. They just want to force people who are holders of U.S. treasuries and bonds to come back and renegotiate, because, I mean, if you lower yields, then you essentially are paying less on your debt. So once you achieve that, it's cheaper for you, plus then generating that income. So why wouldn't they do that?
Yeah, guys. So I was looking at, because I remember there was a study that was done back in, I think it was probably 2022 or 2023, by the Peterson Institute for International Economics. And that study found that Trump's tariffs during his first term actually cost U.S. consumers and businesses about $51 billion a year. Hence the question I was asking about how much of a consideration is there for the U.S. consumers themselves. Because yes, he argues that these tariffs are important and they're essential to revitalize U.S. manufacturing. And you want to encourage consumers as well to buy America, because, as I said, any other business that exports to that market, when you have tariffs that are being hiked like that, you have to find a way to plug that hole. So you increase your prices. Who gets affected by that? It's the consumers in that market. So what Trump says now is, let's encourage people to buy America. So when this vehicle that gets exported from South Africa comes in, Trump says, yeah, you see, it's very expensive for you as a result of our tariffs. Then go prefer and choose something that is local. But in the long term, in fact, even just short term, how is that going to impact the Americans themselves? We live in this is an interconnected global economy. America as a superpower has become, in fact, a super world economy, a superpower. Why? Because it's played a critical role, leading role in that interconnected global economy. And Donald Trump has just broken that all apart. How do you think we should respond as South Africa? Do we retaliate? Can we even afford to retaliate? Do we lower our own tariffs on the U.S.? Because he says any country that lowers their tariffs, then he's willing to renegotiate and lower these duties on us. I mean, you should see how they've even calculated how countries have duties on the U.S. It doesn't even make sense that we, as South Africa, have actually been charging the U.S. about 60%. These are tariffs charged to the U.S. The way they calculated it, this doesn't even make sense. So what do we do? And if you are in an industry that's going to be affected, you export to the US, I'd like to hear your thoughts. How concerned are you? And are there protections you're putting in place to protect the business? 011-883-0702. That takes us to exactly 9:30.
Your voice,
Your station.
your open line
Walk the talk with Clement Manyathela.
on 702.
24 minutes before 10 o'clock. Let me hear from Moses in Senton, and then I'm going to bring in Khaya Sithole, who's a chartered accountant, just to give you a sense of what are the impacts of these kind of tariffs, impact on us, but also impact on Americans. Moses, what are your thoughts? You're in Senton. Hi.
Hi, Clement.
Sure.
Trump is the best ludicrous leader that we have on earth. He looks after Americans. Just think about it, okay? He is saying the minimum you should do is bring your manufacturing facilities into America. But actually what Trump wants is for Americans to set up the manufacturing companies themselves in America so that they can manufacture these cars for Americans, create jobs. And you know, the big thing for him is that then he is sorting out the foreign account. He won't have a deficit in his foreign account with South Africa or EU or anybody because he's not buying anything from them. But those countries need something from America. If they do buy, they may not buy. Then it's creating his foreign reserves. Now, if you look at, okay, so that's the one thing. So the companies are going to America. Is the first prize, they must be owned by Americans. Second prize is that it can be a foreign company because it will still be expatriating profit, you see. Now, the one big mistake that we are doing, take what where they were saying, we will not send minerals. America doesn't need our minerals. America is a big country. They've got all the minerals we have. So basically, by Gwede saying that, America is opening mining companies to mine his own minerals because he has them. He can get them also from Ukraine if he wants to. But actually, he can mine them in America. America doesn't need our minerals. Therefore, we are cooked, if you really think about it. America doesn't need us. America's foreign account is going to be very good. Americans will have more jobs, okay? And some people will still continue to buy from America because there's something that America is producing which they can't produce in their country.
Okay, Moses, in Senton, thank you for your call. I'm still not convinced that America can succeed while isolating itself in this interconnected global economy. I'll come to you, Jabu, in 4 ways. I want to take Khaya Sithole quickly, who's a chartered accountant. Khaya, let me start from that point that Moses raises about America, working for America because America doesn't need us. Given the structure of this global economy, can a country succeed by isolating itself like this?
I don't believe so. And I think quite interestingly, even based on Trump's own actions, so if you look at the tariffs that he implemented yesterday and the formula that he's applied, I've been able to find the document that seems to be the premise for his formula. So in that document, what it says is that the United States is indeed the second largest exporter of goods in the world behind China. So they export goods worth $2.1 trillion to the globe. They, in turn, then import goods worth $3.2 trillion into the United States. So if you think, for example, about the number of U.S. businesses that export goods worth $2.1 trillion to the rest of the world, the fact that such businesses could simply just operate with just a market of 300 million U.S. citizens compared to the 8 billion people in the world, that simply just doesn't get the mathematical dimensions right for me. So you'd have to ask yourself the question of whether Trump's proposition is that, look, we can operate as a standalone economy without having to work or trade with anyone else. And I think the very first question is what happens to those $2.1 trillion in exports that they already have. On the import side, when you're importing $3.2 trillion of goods, it's very clear that you don't have
the capacity to manufacture everything that you need internally. So again, with that one, if everybody had to say we're no longer trading with the United States, you'd have to ask whether everything that they were importing up to that rate of $3.2 trillion is available in that domestic market, and I suspect the answer is no.
Well, his argument would be that by imposing these tariffs, I'm trying to create an environment where Americans themselves are going to start participating in those industries, and we revitalize U.S. manufacturing. And then ultimately you get Americans who then are forced to sort of buy local, like American consumers. Isn't that, that's the argument that he uses.
Yeah, but it's an argument that is limited by design. So the very first problem here is that the very basic fundamentals of international trade is that I buy from you what I don't have, and I sell to you what you don't have. There isn't a single country anywhere in the globe that is able to say that the entire economic value chain can be cultivated internally. It just simply doesn't work like that. So there are instances in the manufacturing, for example, where he indeed has got a stronger case for saying that, look, we used to manufacture in-house and then it all went off to other countries. We want to bring that back. But in instances where, for example, you're importing some particular minerals that are only available in some countries that have had the fortune of those natural endowments, well, you simply cannot in-source that because you do not have it within your territory. So it doesn't actually apply across the entire spectrum of economic activities. There are things that America simply doesn't have and they could never have because they just don't have that as a natural endowment. So you still have to interact with other partners in the globe in order to be able to access those, especially when you need them to in-house as much of the manufacturing value chains as he wants to do.
Okay, so how do we respond then as South Africa? Because, it is concerning, especially because for the last 2 decades or so, we enjoyed duty-free access to the U.S. market through AGOA. So these exports are expected to, face these high tariffs, even like the exports that we're benefiting from AGOA. What's the best way then to respond as government? Because Trump says if you lower your own tariffs on America, then we can renegotiate these duties.
So a lot of people believe that retaliatory tariffs are the way to go. So if he says 30, you say 30. If he says 40, you say 40. Unfortunately, it's not a very linear process because then there's a question of, well, if we decided that we wanted to impose those particular tariffs, what is the impact on the ultimate end user, which is the South African consumer? Trump seems to operate on the premise that Americans will not be affected because he just keeps saying that other people will pay the price. But that's quite simply untrue. So if goods are more expensive for citizens to acquire, the citizens will ultimately have to pay more. So a retaliation is not necessarily the easiest way to get around this. When you speak about the question of AGOA, well, at this stage, AGOA is actually a limited preferential access model, which simply says that it's not every single South African good or service that is being traded in the United States that is subject to that. There is a list, a designated list of items that when they come into the U.S. market, then they're currently duty-free. Now, obviously, if he then says there's a universal tariff of 30% on everything that looks South African, then it means by definition, AGOA, as far as we're concerned, is dead. But he doesn't, in his engagements, deliberate on that as a specific issue. He simply just issues blanket tariffs across all countries, with the exception of Mexico and China, where he has been differentiating up until now. But obviously, it now looks like there's just a universal model based on the formula, a very strange formula that he applied yesterday.
And just lastly, how does this affect American consumers in the short term? And I say in the short term because I'm trying to at least give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe in the long term they do revitalize the manufacturing industry of America. Maybe in the long term this gamble that he's taking is somehow going to pay off. But short term, how are Americans going to be affected?
So in the short term, the question that they have to deal with is a question of whether alternatives exist in the local market. So if they were buying a bottle of wine from South Africa for 100 Rand and then suddenly it becomes $130, every consumer then has to make the call of whether they still want to buy and pay that higher price or if they look for local alternatives. So there might be an initial spike in the demand for local products. But again, that only applies to local products that exist in that particular market. And then in relation to what he ultimately wants to do, he then wants the manufacturers, those that have a longer term viewpoint, to then ask themselves the question of whether they can afford to lose access to a 300 million strong market. And the simple answer is that no one can afford to lose access to that market. Then the secondary question is, can they still ship the same volumes if they're now going to be priced at a higher price point due to the tariff? And the answer is that very few can maintain the same volumes and the quantities. So then the third option is that, well, if you then manufacture your product within the U.S. territory, you not only get the benefit of zero tariffs, but you've now got immediate and direct access to the American market. So there will indeed be those who take the view that, look, this is going to be a long-term project, so therefore we may as well go and be located in the United States, which is what Trump has been saying that he's calling for, to bring back the manufacturing jobs that have been lost. But that work for the manufacturing sector, I'm not sure if it's an equally strong conversation across other parts of the economic value chain.
Khaya Sithole, Chartered Accountant, thank you so much for coming through to just contextualize Liberation Day. That was yesterday in America. I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump wants it to be a holiday at some point, maybe next year. The 1st of April or 2nd of April will be known in America as Liberation Day. That's the day that the U.S., because that's what Donald Trump said. He said, that's a day when we will be remembered. It will be remembered as a day that the American industry was reborn. Watch out for it. It may just be Liberation Day, and it's a holiday in the U.S. in the coming years.
Your voice.
Your station.
Your open line.
Walk the talk with Clement Manyathela.
On 702.
Jabu, you calling from Fourways. Good morning.
Morning, Clement. The way I'm looking into this is that Trump didn't have any choice here, because if you look at it, the U.S. is losing power across all metrics, across all measurements. For an example, if you look at the debt that the U.S. has, they are sitting at almost $84 trillion of debt, which it has now become unsustainable actually in the long run. Two, the dollar as the reserve currency of the world is actually falling. So you've got BRICS, you've got the Chinese, the Indians, everyone, and the dollar's dominance since 1954 up until now, it is actually on the decline. So, and you've got China and all of these other economies that are challenging the U.S. So the U.S. is a big brother from Second World War. After Second World War, it doesn't have that leverage anymore to dish out cities to everyone. What Trump is doing, he is actually gambling. So he is, throwing red meat to everyone to say, let us restructure, let us negotiate. These tariffs are a first attempt to renegotiate the U.S. role in the world economy, because the U.S. role in the world economy is actually crumbling. It's no longer dominant as it used to be. So, and it cannot continue like that. So that is why what it's doing is that America can only win here if there's no retaliation from other, and the chances of other economies not retaliating are very high. Why? Simply because of the political influence and the military influence that the U.S. has. So, for an example, you said I read that Audi, Ferrari, and all these other manufacturers are already moving their factories into the U.S. and all these things. But for me, the leaning for South Africa is that I think the world is actually changing at a drastic pace. South Africa must actually take drastic steps in the sense that we must, for an example, South Africa must stop subsidizing our SOEs. It is a black drain into our fiscals, and it's not sustainable at all. So hundreds of billions of rands are being thrown to revive.
But that stopped, Jabu, to be fair on government, since Tito Mboweni days. Remember, they took that hardline approach of no more bailouts. If anything, we can give you maybe a guarantee so you can go and loan some money. But there's been a hardline approach in recent years.
Yeah, but my point here in all of this is that I think the SA government also, they need to be decisive in terms of which road they want to chart. Let's look at, I'm not looking at the economy only. Let's look at the EU. The EU is a signatory to ICC. And today, Benjamin Netanyahu is in Hungary. And Hungary is part of EU, and Hungary is a signatory to
the Rome Statute.
ICC. Yes, but South Africa couldn't even allow Putin to come in here because it was afraid that it could be blamed and all these things because it's a signatory. What I'm trying to say is that everyone is doing their own things. They don't care anymore about international rules and everything. Everyone is looking at their own national interests, and that's what South Africa is supposed to be doing. Who would have thought that a European nation like Hungary, which is part of the EU, is invited Netanyahu, like who has been charged by the ICC. There is no condemnation from the EU. There's no condemnation from anyone. But if it was South Africa that had invited someone that had been indicted...
Remember with Omar al-Bashir? With Omar al-Bashir, we were in trouble for not arresting him. And in fact, there was so much pressure on, the even Russian president, because I think the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, wanted to come, wanted to dare the ICC and say, I will be in South Africa and nothing is going to happen to me. But yeah, that wouldn't have worked for us because there are courts that ruled against our government in the Omar al-Bashir matter. But yeah, Jabu, Hungary, you're right. Benjamin Netanyahu is there. And I think Hungary already indicated yesterday, I think when I was watching CNN, they had indicated that they will not detain or respect this arrest warrant from the ICC and arrest Benjamin, Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. But yeah, someone on the WhatsApp line says, yeah, I get where Jabu is coming from here. Maybe there's hope for countries to restructure the global architecture. Yeah, is that the opportunity? Is this an opportunity to end the unipolar dominance of Washington like we are often told? Is this a moment where we're going to start seeing the reintroduction of a multipolar democratic order that belongs to the majority of the people on earth? Is that now possible? Maybe we need to start looking at the positive sides of this tragedy. MJ, in fact, let's start with you, Jennifer in Sandton. What are your thoughts? Good morning.
Something that we're not taking into account, when South Africa suffered sanctions, our economy didn't collapse. In fact, a number of industries grew, and there were a lot of products that still are internationally acclaimed products, things like creepy crawly, in fact, entire surfing lines and stuff like that were produced in South Africa because of sanctions. Things like sporting goods, hockey sticks, tennis rackets, and all that industry actually grew because we needed to manufacture our own goods. So we turned in. Do you not think America, with all their businessmen, with all the entrepreneurs in America, that they cannot lager, as we would have said, our old regime would have said, they were lagering, they were turning in on their country. Do you not think that they can actually start up businesses, improve factories, re-employ people? I was in West Virginia for 4 months, and in that area, more than half of the men in that area are unemployed because coal mines have been closed down, all this sort of thing has gone. Those will be resuscitated. Trump has already said he'd do that. Those miners will go back to work. The refineries in those areas will start refining again because they will bring in new oil deposits. America is a country of businessmen. It's a country of entrepreneurs. They will turn this around to their benefit. Look, Trump has wanted to cut the AGOA treaty. When he was first in office, he wasn't able to do it because of the length of the treaty. And he promised he would do it when he got in this time. Yeah. The AGOA thing didn't stand a chance. And look, it's really unfortunate. I sit on a lot of committees where this is discussed. And it's a terrible thing for South Africa. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. The wine industry's going to be trashed. Our agricultural industry is going to be trashed. Our tourist industry is going to be trashed. Probably the rand will crash. We need to stop whinging and either we play international politics. We've decided we're not going to do that. Then we need to have a plan. Then we need to have a plan with cheap finances, cheap money, so businesses can start up. We need to stop dipping hands, and this is across the board in South Africa, dipping our hands into the till and developing companies instead. Stop thinking about fancy cars and the high salaries, and think how your actual company can be improved, can be increased, how your workers can be educated and lifted and more productive for you as a company, not you as a person.
Yeah.
And we need to change our outlook in South Africa and say, look, we're not people in South Africa. We are South Africans, so we're going to actually pick up this country, and we're not going to worry about what the rest of the world says, but we're going to make sure that our country is going to succeed.
Yeah, got it. Jennifer in Sandton, thank you for your contribution. MJ in Pretoria, your thoughts?
Hi, Clement. Look, my view is no country can claim to be self-sufficient when it comes to international trade. I'll make this simple example. If you look at agriculture, for an example, I mean, we know that agricultural crops are seasonal products. So let's say, for an example, South Africa is the biggest producer of maize. But being the biggest producer of maize, at some point, we couldn't produce enough maize, and we had to rely on neighboring countries like Zimbabwe and so forth. You get what I'm saying? So America, as much as they may think that they want to produce everything locally, I mean, if they are hit by natural disasters, for an example, they export their chicken to South Africa. If they are hit by bird flu, they will be forced to import a lot of chicken. And who is going to be hurt? The ultimate person who's going to feel this either way, Clement, is the American consumer. The American politicians, American businesses will be smiling because now there will be limited competition, because, I mean, they know many companies won't import easily because of the tariffs. But now, what are they going to do? They will then start hiking prices. Who's going to feel the heat is the American consumer. So it's not going to be easy for American consumer, just as it's not going to be easy for us as foreign citizens.
Yeah, MJ, great contribution there. Thank you. Trump says, well, it's going to be painful, but that's just in the short term. Long term, you will reap the benefits. I guess we'll have to wait and see. It's 2 minutes before 10 o'clock.